My son called me laughing, saying, "We did it our way, Mom." I smiled, opened my phone, and hit send on a single message. 3 minutes later, his entire world collapsed, and he realized I had known everything all along. Before we start, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. My name is Margaret Eleanor Hayes, and I just turned 67 years old last month. For most of my life, I have been the kind of mother who never knew how to say no to her children. I raised 3 beautiful kids completely alone after my husband Robert died of a sudden heart attack when our youngest was only 5 years old. I can still remember that terrible morning when the ambulance came, when my whole world shattered into a million pieces, and I realized I had to be strong enough for all of us. Those years after Robert's death were the hardest of my life. I worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. During the day, I was a waitress at a downtown diner, smiling through my exhaustion and aching feet. At night, I cleaned offices in the business district, scrubbing floors on my hands and knees while my children slept. I sewed their clothes by hand because I could not afford store prices. When my oldest son, Daniel, needed money for college applications, I sold my engagement ring, the last precious piece of my husband I had left, the one thing I swore I would never part with. But I did it without hesitation because that is what mothers do. Daniel grew up to become a successful real estate developer. He married a beautiful, polished woman named Jennifer who wore designer clothes and drove a luxury car. Together, they gave me 2 grandchildren that I loved more than life itself. My daughter Lisa became a teacher and lived 3 states away with her husband. My youngest son, Mike, worked as a contractor and visited me twice a week to help with repairs around my house. Everyone who knew us said I was blessed. They saw a devoted mother who had sacrificed everything and been rewarded with successful, loving children. What they did not see, what I did not see until it was almost too late, was that I was about to become the victim of the cruelest, most calculated betrayal a parent could ever imagine. And the person who would destroy me was the son I loved most in this world. My days had fallen into a beautiful, peaceful rhythm that I treasured deeply. I lived in the same 2-story house that Robert and I had bought 43 years ago when we were newlyweds, full of dreams. It was a modest home with white siding and dark green shutters, nothing fancy, but it was mine. The mortgage had been paid off for 15 years, and every corner held precious memories. In the backyard, I had a garden where I grew the most beautiful tomatoes you have ever seen, along with roses in every color that bloomed from spring through fall. That garden was my sanctuary, the place where I talked to Robert's memory and felt closest to the life we had built together. Every Sunday without fail, the family gathered at my house for dinner. It was our sacred tradition, the one thing that made me feel like all my years of struggle had been worth it. Daniel would arrive around 4 in the afternoon with Jennifer and the kids, always bringing a bottle of wine and filling the house with laughter. I would spend all day Saturday preparing my famous pot roast with carrots and potatoes, the recipe Robert's mother had taught me 50 years ago. We would sit around the old oak dining table, the same one where I had served thousands of meals, and we would share stories about our week. The grandchildren would tell me about school, and I would sneak them extra cookies when Jennifer was not looking. My daughter Lisa called me every single evening at 7 o'clock sharp. We would talk for at least 30 minutes about everything and nothing, the kind of comfortable conversation only a mother and daughter can have. Mike came by twice a week, usually Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, to mow the lawn or fix whatever needed fixing. He never let me pay him, always saying that family does not charge family. On Thursdays, I played bridge with 3 women I had known for over 30 years at the community center. We drank terrible coffee and laughed about getting older together. On Saturdays, I took my grandchildren to the park, pushing them on swings and buying them ice cream. I volunteered at St. Mary's Church every Wednesday, helping organize food drives and prepare meals for families in need. After decades of being the one who needed help, it felt good to finally be the one giving it. Life felt complete, peaceful, and safe. I had enough money saved from selling Robert's small construction business to live comfortably for the rest of my days. I wanted for nothing except more time with the people I loved. It started on a Tuesday afternoon in late September, such a small thing that I almost missed it entirely. I had gone to the grocery store to pick up ingredients for chicken soup because Mike had mentioned he was feeling under the weather. I returned home earlier than usual, probably around 2 in the afternoon, and was surprised to see Daniel's silver Mercedes parked in my driveway. He had not mentioned he was coming by, but that was not unusual. My children had keys to my house and were always welcome. I walked through the front door carrying 2 bags of groceries, calling out his name cheerfully. I found him in my home office, the small room at the back of the house where I kept all my important papers and documents. He was standing by the old wooden filing cabinet, the one Robert had bought at an estate sale decades ago, and his hand was on one of the drawers. When he heard me enter, he jumped slightly and quickly pushed the drawer closed. His face flushed red, and for just a split second, I saw something in his eyes that I had never seen before. It looked almost like panic, or maybe guilt, but it disappeared so fast that I convinced myself I had imagined it. Daniel laughed immediately, that easy, charming laugh of his, and said he had been looking for an old family photo. Jennifer was working on a scrapbook project for the kids, he explained, and she wanted pictures from when he was young. I smiled and offered to help him look through the photo albums I kept in the living room closet. He declined quickly, saying he had to get back to work, and he kissed my cheek before rushing out the door. The whole interaction lasted maybe 2 minutes, but something about it sat uncomfortably in my chest for the rest of the day. The next week during our Sunday dinner, Jennifer started asking questions that felt strange. She wanted to know about property taxes on my house, asking how much they were, and whether they had gone up recently. She asked if I had updated my will lately, saying it was important for older people to keep their affairs in order. She asked about my monthly expenses and whether I ever thought about downsizing to something smaller and easier to maintain. The questions were wrapped in concern, delivered with a sweet smile and a gentle touch on my hand, but they made me uncomfortable in a way I could not quite explain. Why was my daughter-in-law suddenly so interested in my finances? Then came the incident that truly planted the first seed of real suspicion. It was a Thursday morning, and Daniel had told me during his phone call the night before that he would be in Chicago all week for a major business deal. But when I came home early from my bridge game, because one of the ladies had gotten sick, I saw his car in my driveway again. I walked into my house quietly, not wanting to startle him, and found him standing in the hallway talking on his phone in a hushed, urgent voice. The moment he saw me, he hung up immediately. His face went pale, then flushed deep red. He stammered something about his Chicago trip being canceled at the last minute and wanting to check on me since he was free. I hugged him and told him I was fine, pushing away the uncomfortable feeling growing in my stomach. But that night, lying in bed, I could not stop thinking about the strange pattern emerging. Why was Daniel in my house when he thought I would not be home? What was he looking for in my filing cabinet? Why had he lied about being in Chicago? I told myself I was being paranoid, that there had to be reasonable explanations. But deep down, something whispered that something was very, very wrong. I spent the next several days actively fighting against my own instincts, telling myself over and over that I was being a foolish, paranoid old woman. Daniel was my son, my firstborn child, the baby boy I had held in my arms 39 years ago and promised to love and protect forever. I had given him everything I had. I had worked myself to exhaustion for him. I had sacrificed my health, my youth, and every dream I ever had so that he could have opportunities I never did. There was absolutely no possible way he would ever hurt me. The very idea was not just unlikely, it was impossible. Every time a suspicious thought crept into my mind, I pushed it away forcefully and replaced it with a happy memory. I remembered the nights when Daniel was 6 years old and had terrible nightmares after his father died. He would crawl into my bed crying, and I would hold him for hours, singing lullabies and promising him that everything would be okay. I remembered his high school graduation when he gave a speech thanking me for never giving up on our family, and I cried so hard I could barely see him on that stage. I remembered the day he got accepted to college with a partial scholarship, and how I had borrowed money from 3 different people to cover the rest of his tuition, because I refused to let him miss that opportunity. Those memories were real. That love was real. I convinced myself that nothing could erase or corrupt something so pure. Jennifer's questions about my finances were just her being practical and thoughtful, I decided. She came from a wealthy family where people talked openly about money and estate planning. She was probably just trying to help me stay organized in my old age. It was actually kind of her to care, was it not? And Daniel being in my house unexpectedly, well, he was busy and his schedule changed constantly. Real estate was an unpredictable business. Maybe he really had been looking for old photos. Maybe his Chicago trip really had been canceled. Maybe I had misread the panic on his face. I threw myself into my normal routines with almost aggressive determination, as if staying busy could silence the doubt growing louder in my mind. I baked 3 batches of chocolate chip cookies for the grandchildren, far more than they could possibly eat. I spent hours in my garden pulling weeds that did not exist and pruning roses that were already perfect. I organized the church fundraiser with obsessive attention to detail, making lists and checking them 5 times. I called Lisa every night and Mike every morning, chatting about nothing important, just needing to hear their voices to remind myself that family was good and love was real. Whenever the image of Daniel's guilty face flashed in my mind, I scolded myself harshly. I was being ungrateful. I was being suspicious and bitter. I was letting loneliness poison my thoughts and turn me against the people who loved me most. Family was everything. Trust was sacred. Blood was thicker than water. I repeated these phrases like prayers, like protection spells against the terrible truth that was trying desperately to break through my denial. I refused to let it in. I absolutely refused. The evidence came on a quiet Wednesday morning in early October, shattering my carefully constructed denial like a hammer through glass. I was sitting at my kitchen table drinking my 2nd cup of coffee and reading the newspaper when my phone rang. The caller ID showed it was my bank, First National, where I had done business for over 30 years. I answered, expecting some routine question about a transaction or maybe a courtesy call about new services they were offering. Instead, a woman named Patricia from the fraud department asked if I had a few minutes to discuss some unusual activity on my account. My heart immediately started beating faster. She explained in a professional but concerned tone that their system had flagged a home equity line of credit that had been opened in my name approximately 3 weeks ago. Someone had already withdrawn $40,000 from it. I felt the room start to spin. I told her there must be some mistake, that I had never opened any line of credit, that I had not even considered such a thing. Patricia's voice became more serious. She said that was exactly why she was calling, that they suspected fraud. She asked me to come to the bank as soon as possible to review the paperwork and file a formal dispute. I grabbed my purse with shaking hands, barely remembering to lock the door behind me as I rushed to my car. The 15-minute drive to the bank felt like an eternity. My mind was racing with possibilities. Identity theft happened all the time, I told myself. Some criminal had probably stolen my information somehow. This had nothing to do with Daniel. It could not possibly have anything to do with my family. At the bank, Patricia led me to a private office and placed a thick folder on the desk between us. She opened it carefully and showed me the application for the home equity line. The signature at the bottom looked remarkably like mine, close enough that I had to study it carefully to see the subtle differences. Someone had practiced copying my handwriting. The address listed was correct, my home address. The Social Security number was mine. But the email address was one I had never seen before, some generic Gmail account, and the phone number listed as the primary contact made my blood run cold. It was Daniel's office line. I must have gone pale because Patricia asked if I was all right. I told her I needed copies of everything, all the documents, all the records. My hands trembled as I signed the fraud affidavit. I drove home in a daze, barely seeing the road in front of me. Once inside my house, I went straight to my home office, to that filing cabinet where I had found Daniel standing weeks before. I opened the drawers with growing dread. My documents were slightly out of order, not the way I always kept them. My property deed had been moved to a different folder. An entire folder containing my financial statements, bank records, and investment information was completely missing. I searched everywhere, going through every drawer, every shelf. Finally, I went outside to check the recycling bin, something making me look there. Buried under old newspapers and junk mail, I found a crumpled photocopy of my driver's license and my Social Security card. Someone had copied my identification documents and then thrown away the evidence. Someone who had access to my home. Someone who had keys. Someone I trusted with everything. My son had stolen from me. I could not sleep for 3 days straight. I lay in bed every night staring at the ceiling, my mind racing through every possible explanation, every possible excuse I could give Daniel. Maybe someone had stolen his office number. Maybe he was a victim too. Maybe this was all some terrible misunderstanding that would make sense once I talked to him. But deep in my heart, in that place where mothers know the truth about their children even when they desperately do not want to, I knew what he had done. I just could not bring myself to face it yet. I said nothing to anyone. I went through the motions of my normal life like an actress playing a role. I smiled at the grocery store. I laughed at bridge club. I answered Lisa's evening phone calls and pretended everything was fine. But inside, I was dying a little more each hour. Sunday dinner arrived like an executioner's appointment. Daniel and Jennifer showed up right on time, all warm hugs and bright smiles. The grandchildren ran to me as always, and I held them tight, wondering if this would be the last normal moment we ever had as a family. I served the pot roast with hands that barely shook. We ate and made small talk about the weather and the kids' school projects. After dinner, once the children went to the living room to watch a movie, I knew I could not wait any longer. My heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone at the table could hear it. I took a deep breath and asked as calmly as I could manage, "Daniel, do you know anything about a home equity line of credit that was opened in my name 3 weeks ago?" The silence that fell over the dining room was deafening. Daniel's fork clattered onto his plate. His face went completely white, then flushed bright red within seconds. Jennifer froze mid-sip of her wine, her eyes darting between Daniel and me. I watched my son's face cycle through shock, panic, and then something that looked almost like anger, as if I had done something wrong by asking the question. He opened his mouth twice before any words came out. "Mom, I can explain," he finally stammered, his voice cracking. It was supposed to be temporary. I had a business opportunity, an investment deal that was absolutely guaranteed to pay off huge. I was going to pay back every penny before you even knew anything had happened. I swear. My voice came out steadier than I expected, cold and flat. "You forged my signature, Daniel. You stole $40,000 from me. That is not borrowing. That is theft." Jennifer suddenly came alive, her voice sharp and defensive, no longer the sweet daughter-in-law I thought I knew. "Stole? Really, Margaret? Let us be honest here. You were going to leave everything to him anyway when you die. We just needed the money now, not years from now. We have bills to pay, investments to make, opportunities that cannot wait. You do not understand how business works. You have never understood." I felt like I had been slapped across the face. The casual cruelty of her words, the entitled assumption that my life savings was somehow already theirs to take, left me breathless. I looked at Daniel, waiting for him to defend me, to tell his wife she was wrong. Instead, he tried to reach across the table to take my hand, his eyes pleading. "Mom, please understand. We did this for the family, for our future, for the kids. You always taught me to think ahead, to plan for tomorrow. That is all we were doing. I was going to tell you eventually. I just needed time to make it right first." I pulled my hand away like his touch burned me. Tears were streaming down my face now, hot and angry. "Get out of my house." Daniel and Jennifer left that night, Jennifer's heels clicking angrily on my hardwood floors, while Daniel kept turning back, trying to apologize, trying to make me understand. I locked the door behind them and stood in my empty house, feeling like the walls were closing in on me. I thought I had discovered the worst of it, that the $40,000 theft was the full extent of my son's betrayal. I thought we could somehow work through this, that maybe with therapy and consequences in time, our family could heal. I had no idea that what I had uncovered was just the tip of an iceberg that went so deep and so dark that it would make me question everything I thought I knew about the boy I had raised. The next morning, I forced myself to go through my filing cabinet with methodical precision. I pulled out every single document, every bank statement, every legal paper, and spread them across my dining room table. What I found made my hands shake so violently I had to sit down before I collapsed. Over the past 6 months, Daniel had been systematically positioning himself to take control of every single thing I owned. This was not an impulsive crime or a desperate mistake. This was a calculated, long-term plan executed with chilling precision. 4 months ago, Daniel had convinced me to add his name to my primary checking account. He said it was just for emergencies in case something happened to me and someone needed to pay my bills. I remembered that conversation so clearly now. We'd been sitting in my kitchen and he had been so sweet and concerned, talking about how he worried about me living alone at my age. He said it would give him peace of mind to know he could help if I ever needed it. I had signed the forms without hesitation, trusting him completely. What I did not realize was that adding his name gave him full legal access to every penny in that account. He could withdraw it all tomorrow and I would have no recourse, but it got worse. So much worse. I found a stack of documents hidden in the back of a drawer that made my stomach turn. Daniel had taken out a second mortgage on my house, this beautiful home that Robert and I had worked so hard to pay off. He had forged my signature on the loan documents using a corrupt notary public he knew through his real estate business. The notary had falsified everything, claiming I had appeared before her and signed willingly. Daniel had borrowed $215,000 against my home, money that was now gone, spent on God knows what. If I could not prove the forgery, I could lose my house entirely. Then I found the emails. Daniel had been careless, printing some of them out, probably to show Jennifer. I found them crumpled in the trash can in my home office, and as I read them, I felt my entire world shatter into pieces. There were dozens of messages between Daniel and Jennifer, going back almost 8 months, discussing their plans in cold clinical detail. They talked about timelines and strategies. They discussed which of my assets to liquidate first and how to hide the money. They had even given their plan a name, calling it Project Inheritance, as if my life was nothing more than a business deal to be executed. One email made me physically sick. Daniel had contacted a lawyer about having me declared mentally incompetent. He had been building a case, gathering what he called evidence of my declining mental state. Jennifer's seemingly innocent questions during Sunday dinners had been part of this evidence gathering. Every time I forgot a small detail or mixed up a date, she had been documenting it. Daniel had even secretly recorded conversations with me, editing them to make me sound confused or forgetful. He was planning to use these recordings to convince a judge that I was no longer capable of managing my own affairs, that I needed a conservator. And of course, he would volunteer to be that conservator, giving him complete legal control over everything I owned. But the most horrifying discovery was buried in an email from Jennifer to Daniel, dated just 2 weeks ago. She'd been researching nursing homes, specifically memory care facilities. The email discussed which ones accepted Medicaid, how long it would take to qualify, and how much they could get for my house if they sold it quickly. They were planning to have me declared incompetent, committed to a facility, and then liquidate all my assets while I was locked away and helpless. Jennifer had even calculated the numbers, estimating they could clear about $400,000 after paying off Daniel's business debts. There were also messages discussing what to do about Lisa and Mike when the time came. Daniel wrote that they would be upset at first, but would eventually understand once they saw how much better off everyone was. He talked about offering them small amounts of money to keep them quiet, to make them complicit in the theft. Jennifer responded that if they caused problems, Daniel could use his legal authority as my conservator to cut them off completely from seeing me. I sat at my dining room table surrounded by evidence of this monstrous conspiracy, and I realized with absolute clarity that this was not just theft. This was a plan to erase me completely, to steal my autonomy, my dignity, my freedom, and my legacy. My son, the baby I had nursed and raised and sacrificed everything for, had looked at me and seen nothing but a bank account to be drained and an obstacle to be removed. He had spent months plotting to lock me away in a facility while he spent every penny Robert and I had worked 40 years to earn, and he had felt absolutely justified doing it. I do not remember falling to the floor, but that is where I found myself. I was curled up on the cold hardwood beside my dining room table, surrounded by papers that proved my son wanted to destroy me, and I could not stop sobbing. The kind of crying that comes from somewhere so deep inside you that it feels like your soul is being ripped out through your chest. I cried until my throat was raw and my eyes were so swollen I could barely see. I cried until there were no more tears left, just dry, gasping sounds that did not even sound human anymore. For 3 days, I barely moved from that spot. I called in sick to my volunteer shift at the church, something I had never done in 15 years. I did not answer the phone when Lisa called at 7 o'clock, like always. I did not go to my bridge game on Thursday. I just lay there on the floor, then eventually dragged myself to my bed, staring at the ceiling and replaying every moment of Daniel's life like a horror movie I could not turn off. I remembered the day he was born, how tiny and perfect he was, with Robert's dark hair and my blue eyes. I remembered holding him in the hospital and making a silent promise that I would give him everything, that he would never want for anything, that I would protect him from every hurt in the world. I had kept that promise, even when it nearly destroyed me. Especially after Robert died, when I became both mother and father to 3 grieving children who needed me to be stronger than I knew how to be. I remembered Daniel at 7 years old, crying because the other kids at school made fun of his clothes. I had stayed up all night sewing him a new shirt from fabric I bought with tip money I was supposed to use for groceries. I remembered his 10th birthday when he wanted a bicycle so badly, and I worked triple shifts for 2 months to afford it, existing on coffee and crackers because I had no money left for food. I remembered finding him sobbing in his room at 13, saying he felt like a burden, and me holding him for hours, promising him that he was my joy, my purpose, my reason for breathing. I remembered selling my engagement ring for his college applications. That ring was the only thing I had left of Robert, the symbol of the love we had shared, the marriage we had built, the life we had dreamed of together. It was a simple ring, nothing extravagant, but it meant everything to me. I had looked at it every day for 20 years and felt Robert's presence. When I sold it to a pawn shop for $300 so Daniel could apply to better schools, I cried in my car for an hour afterward, but I did it because I loved him more than I loved my own memories, more than I loved myself. I remembered his college graduation, how proud I was standing in that crowd watching him walk across the stage. I remembered his first big real estate deal, how he called me crying with happiness, saying none of it would have been possible without me. I remembered the day he introduced me to Jennifer, how he said he had finally found someone worthy of our family. I remembered holding my first grandchild, his daughter, and feeling like every sacrifice had been worth it because I had helped create this beautiful legacy. And now I knew it had all been a lie, or at least it had become one. That sweet boy who cried because he felt like a burden had grown into a man who saw me as exactly that, a burden to be eliminated. The son I had given everything to had repaid me by plotting to steal everything from me and lock me away in a facility where I would die alone and forgotten while he spent the money Robert and I had bled for. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror on the third day and did not recognize the woman staring back at me. My face was gray and hollow. My eyes were dead. I looked like a ghost, like I had already died and just had not realized it yet. I felt so stupid, so naive, so utterly foolish for trusting so blindly. How had I not seen this coming? What kind of mother raises a child capable of such cruelty? Where had I gone wrong? Part of me, a terrible dark part that I am ashamed to admit existed, wondered if I should just let it happen. Maybe I should just let Daniel take everything. Maybe I should sign whatever papers he wanted, go quietly to whatever facility he chose, and let him have his inheritance early. I was tired, so incredibly tired of fighting, of struggling, of trying to be strong. I had been strong for 40 years since Robert died, and what had it gotten me? Betrayal, abandonment, a son who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle between him and money. I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark, feeling more alone than I had ever felt in my entire life, and I genuinely did not know if I had the strength to survive this. On the fourth morning, something changed. I woke up before dawn, and for the first time in days, I did not immediately start crying. I lay in bed watching the darkness slowly give way to gray light through my bedroom window, and I felt something stirring inside me that I had not felt in a very long time. It was not hope, exactly. Not yet. It was something harder and colder than hope. It was anger. I got out of bed and walked to my kitchen, my bare feet cold against the floor. I made coffee with steady hands, measuring the grounds precisely the way Robert had taught me 50 years ago, as I waited for it to brew. I looked out the window at my garden. The roses Robert and I had planted together were still blooming despite the October chill, their petals bright red against the morning mist. Those roses had survived 30 winters. They had been frozen, pruned back to almost nothing, covered in snow, and they still came back every spring more beautiful than before. I took my coffee and walked outside into the cold morning air, still wearing my nightgown and bathrobe. I stood among the roses and watched the sun rise over the neighborhood where I had lived for 43 years. This was my home. Robert and I had chosen it together, had made love for the first time in the bedroom upstairs, had brought our babies home to these walls. We had painted every room ourselves. We had planted every tree in the yard. Robert had died in the living room, in my arms, and with his last breath, he had made me promise to take care of our family and protect what we had built. I had kept that promise for 23 years since his death. I had worked until my hands bled. I had gone hungry so my children could eat. I had given up every dream, every comfort, every desire so that they could have better lives than I did. And I had done it all with love, with joy even, because that is what you do for family. But now I realize with crystal clarity that family is supposed to protect each other, not destroy each other. Love is supposed to lift you up, not tear you down and lock you away. I thought about Lisa, my sweet daughter who called me every night without fail. I thought about Mike, who mowed my lawn every week and never let me pay him. They were good children who deserved their fair inheritance from the life their father and I had built. If I let Daniel do this, if I gave up and let him steal everything, I would be betraying Lisa and Mike just as surely as Daniel had betrayed me. I would be allowing their father's legacy to be stolen by greed and lies. And then I thought about my grandchildren, Daniel's children, who I loved with my whole heart. What kind of lesson would they learn if their father got away with this? that it is acceptable to abuse the people who love you, that you can steal from your own mother and face no consequences, that kindness and sacrifice make you weak and deserving of exploitation. I could not let them grow up thinking those things were true. I could not let them become people who believed that cruelty was justified if it benefited them financially. But more than anything, I thought about myself, about Margaret Eleanor Hayes, the woman who had survived poverty, widowhood, and 40 years of backbreaking work, the woman who had built a life from nothing after Robert died, the woman who had raised 3 children alone and never once asked for help or pity. That woman was not weak. That woman was not a victim to be discarded. That woman was a survivor, a fighter, someone who had faced down every hardship life threw at her and kept standing. I walked back into my house and sat down at my kitchen table. I pulled out a notebook and a pen, the same kind of notebook I had used 40 years ago to budget every penny when I was raising my children alone. At the top of the first page, I wrote in clear, firm letters, "Evidence." Then I started writing down everything I knew, every document I had found, every conversation I remembered, every suspicious moment over the past 6 months. I wrote for 2 hours straight, organizing the information methodically, creating a timeline, noting every detail. Daniel thought I was just a helpless old woman, too naive and too loving to fight back. He thought my unconditional love for him meant I would accept anything, forgive anything, allow anything. He had mistaken my kindness for weakness, my love for blindness, and my age for helplessness. He was about to learn the hardest lesson of his life. He was about to discover that the most dangerous thing in the world is a mother who has nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. I was done crying. I was done being a victim. It was time to show my son exactly who his mother really was. I spent that entire day researching elder fraud attorneys on my laptop. I read through dozens of websites looking for someone who specialized in exactly this kind of case, someone who had experience with financial abuse by family members. Most lawyers I called were sympathetic but hesitant. Family cases are messy, they said. Hard to prove, they said. Are you sure you want to do this to your own son? They asked, as if I was the one doing something wrong. Then I found Catherine Morrison. She was in her 50s, a former prosecutor who had switched to private practice specializing in elder abuse cases after her own grandmother had been victimized by a caregiver. When I called her office, her assistant scheduled me for the very next morning. I gathered every single document I had found, organized them in chronological order, and put them in a large envelope. That night, I barely slept, rehearsing what I would say, terrified she would not believe me or would not take my case. Catherine's office was in a modern building downtown. She was a tall woman with sharp eyes and an air of quiet competence that immediately put me at ease. I sat across from her desk and told her everything, my voice shaking at first but growing stronger as I went on. I showed her the forged loan applications, the bank statements, the emails discussing their plan to have me declared incompetent, the nursing home research, all of it. She listened without interrupting, taking notes occasionally, her expression growing darker with each revelation. When I finished, Catherine leaned back in her chair and said something I will never forget. "Margaret, in 20 years of practicing law, I have seen a lot of terrible things. But what your son has done is one of the most calculated and cruel conspiracies I have ever encountered, and I promise you, we are going to stop him." We filed a police report that very afternoon for identity theft, fraud, forgery, and financial exploitation of an elderly person. The detective assigned to my case was a woman named Sarah Chen, who treated me with such kindness and respect that I almost cried in the police station. She said these cases were more common than people realized, and that family members were often the perpetrators because they had access and trust. She promised to investigate thoroughly. Catherine helped me open a new bank account at a completely different bank across town. We transferred every penny from my old account, the one Daniel had access to, before he could drain it. We removed his name from everything. I changed every password on every account I had, making them long and complex, writing them down in a notebook I kept hidden in a new safe Catherine helped me buy. I installed a home security system with cameras covering every entrance to my house. If Daniel tried to come into my home again without permission, I would have video evidence. Catherine also hired a private investigator, a former FBI agent named Robert Torres. Within 2 weeks, he uncovered evidence that was even more damning than what I had found. He obtained text messages between Daniel and Jennifer from their phone records through legal discovery processes. The messages were cold and calculating, discussing me like I was a problem to be solved rather than a human being. Robert also discovered that Daniel had been embezzling money from his own real estate company to cover his gambling debts. He had lost over $300,000 in an online poker addiction he had been hiding from everyone. He was planning to use my money to cover the shortfall before his business partners discovered the theft. My mother's life savings was going to be used to hide my son's crimes. But I did something else too, something that Catherine initially advised against, but eventually agreed was brilliant. I continued to act completely normal around Daniel. When he called nervously a few days after our confrontation, I answered the phone with my usual warmth. I told him I had been thinking about what he said, that maybe I had overreacted, that I understood he was under business pressure. I could hear the relief in his voice. He actually thought I was going to forgive him, that I was too weak and too loving to really hold him accountable. I invited him to dinner the following Sunday. I told him we needed to move forward as a family, that I wanted to discuss how we could work through this difficult time together. Daniel agreed immediately, probably already planning how to manipulate me into dropping any potential charges, how to convince me to give him access to my accounts again. Jennifer would come too, he said. They wanted to make things right. Perfect, I told him. I wanted them both there. I needed them to feel safe, to feel like they had won, to let their guard down completely. Because Catherine and I were setting a trap, and I needed Daniel to walk right into it. I needed him to confess, to say out loud all the things he had written in those emails, to admit what he had planned to do to me. And I knew exactly how to make that happen. My son thought he was so clever, so much smarter than his uneducated mother, who had spent her life scrubbing floors and serving food. He was about to learn that intelligence has nothing to do with education, and everything to do with knowing when you are being hunted. The week leading up to that Sunday felt like the longest week of my entire life. Every morning I woke up with my heart pounding, rehearsing what I would say, how I would remain calm, how I would not break down when the moment came. Catherine had coached me extensively on exactly how to handle the confrontation. She explained that I needed Daniel to feel comfortable enough to speak freely, to admit things on the record. We had set up a recording system, completely legal in our state, hidden in my living room. Everything that was said would be captured as evidence. I called Lisa and Mike on Tuesday and asked them to come home for Sunday dinner. I told them it was important, that there was something serious we needed to discuss as a family. I could hear the concern in Lisa's voice. She asked if I was sick, if something was wrong with my health. I assured her I was fine physically, but that there was a family matter that could not wait any longer. Mike said he would drive up Saturday night and stay over. Lisa booked a flight that would get her in Sunday morning. Neither of them had any idea what was coming. Catherine arranged for Detective Chen to be present, along with another officer, waiting in an unmarked car 2 houses down the street. They would come when called. She also had the court reporter ready in my guest bedroom upstairs with recording equipment as backup to what we already had hidden in the living room. Everything had to be documented perfectly, legally, with no room for Daniel's expensive lawyers to claim procedural errors or violations of his rights. On Saturday, I cleaned my house from top to bottom, the way I always did before Sunday dinners. It felt surreal, going through these familiar motions while knowing that tomorrow everything would explode. I baked my famous pot roast, the same recipe I had made hundreds of times. I set the dining room table with my good china, the set Robert and I had received as a wedding gift 50 years ago. I ironed the tablecloth. I arranged fresh flowers in a vase. Everything had to look normal, traditional, like every other Sunday dinner we had ever had. Mike arrived Saturday evening around 8. He hugged me tight and immediately asked what was going on. I told him he would find out tomorrow that I needed him to trust me. He looked worried but agreed to wait. We ate leftover soup together and watched an old movie, though I could not have told you what it was about. My mind was elsewhere, running, through scenarios preparing for every possible reaction. Lisa's flight landed at 10 Sunday morning. Mike picked her up from the airport while I finished cooking. When they returned, Lisa's face was tight with anxiety. She pulled me aside in the kitchen and asked directly if I was dying, if this was the conversation about end-of-life plans. I touched her face gently and told her I was not dying, but that something very serious had happened. She deserved to know the truth. They both did. She started to ask more questions, but I stopped her. "In a few hours," I said. "I promise you will understand everything in a few hours." Daniel called at noon to confirm he and Jennifer were still coming. His voice was light, almost cheerful. He said Jennifer was baking brownies to bring, as if this was just another normal family gathering. I told him we would eat at 1 o'clock sharp. He said they would be there. I could hear the confidence in his voice, the certainty that he had successfully manipulated his foolish old mother back into compliance and trust. He had no idea what was waiting for him. At 12:30, Catherine arrived and went straight upstairs to the guest bedroom where the court reporter was already set up. Detective Chen texted me that she and her partner were in position down the street. Everything was ready. I checked my appearance in the hallway mirror. I had dressed carefully in a simple blue dress, the kind of outfit a grandmother wears to Sunday dinner. I wanted to look exactly like myself, like the victim I was, not like someone preparing for war. At 12:45, Lisa and Mike were sitting in the living room, confused and worried, asking me quiet questions I would not answer. I made coffee with steady hands. I checked the pot roast one final time. I adjusted the flowers on the dining room table. And then, at exactly 1 o'clock, I heard Daniel's car pull into my driveway. I walked to the front door and opened it before he could knock. Daniel stood there with Jennifer beside him, both of them smiling those bright, fake smiles. Jennifer held a plate of brownies covered in plastic wrap. Daniel leaned in to kiss my cheek, and I let him, even though my skin crawled at his touch. "Come in," I said warmly, stepping aside. "Everyone is here. We have so much to talk about." Daniel walked into my house with the confidence of a man who thought he had already won. He had no idea he was walking into an ambush. He had no idea that in less than an hour, his entire life was going to come crashing down around him. And he had absolutely no idea that his mother, the woman he had so badly underestimated, was about to teach him the most painful lesson he would ever learn. We gathered in the living room, just like we had done 1,000 times before. Daniel and Jennifer sat on the sofa, still smiling. Lisa and Mike sat in the armchairs, looking confused and tense. I remained standing, positioning myself near the coffee table where I had placed a thick manila folder. My hands were not shaking anymore. I felt completely calm, almost detached, as if I was watching this scene happen to someone else. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice steady and clear. "There is something very important that Lisa and Mike need to know. Something about their brother that I wish was not true, but unfortunately is." Daniel's smile faltered slightly. Jennifer shifted in her seat. I opened the folder and pulled out the first document, the fraudulent home equity line application with Daniel's office number listed as the contact. 3 weeks ago, someone opened a home equity line of credit in my name and stole $40,000 from me. That someone was Daniel. Lisa gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Mike stood up immediately, his face darkening with anger. Daniel's face went white as a sheet. He started to speak, but I held up my hand, silencing him. I continued methodically, pulling out document after document. The forged second mortgage for $215,000. The bank statements showing Daniel had access to my accounts. The emails discussing their plan to have me declared incompetent. The nursing home brochures. The messages calculating how much money they could get by selling my house and liquidating my assets. With each revelation, I passed the documents around. Lisa was crying openly now, reading the emails with shaking hands. Mike's jaw was clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. Jennifer jumped to her feet, her composure cracking. "This is insane. You are taking everything out of context, Margaret. Daniel was trying to help you. You are old, you forget things. You need someone to manage your affairs before you lose everything." "Sit down, Jennifer," I said quietly, and something in my voice made her obey. Daniel tried a different approach. He leaned forward, his eyes pleading, his voice taking on that manipulative tone I now recognized so clearly. "Mom, please. Yes, I made mistakes. Yes, I should have asked permission, but I was desperate. The business was failing. I have gambling debts I could not tell anyone about. I panicked, but I never meant to hurt you. I love you. You know I love you." "You love my money," I said flatly. "You love what you thought you could take from me." Then I pulled out my phone, and this was the moment I had been waiting for, the trap that Daniel had walked right into without even knowing. 2 days ago, Daniel called me. He thought we had made peace. He thought I had forgiven him, that I was too weak and stupid to fight back. He called to gloat, and I recorded every word. Daniel's face went from white to gray. "Mom, no." I pressed play. Daniel's voice filled the room, arrogant and cruel in a way that made me barely recognize him as my son. "I told Jennifer you would cave, Mom. You always do. You are too soft, too sentimental. You will never actually call the police on your own son. We did it our way, and it worked. By next month, we will have the house refinanced, your accounts transferred, and the incompetency petition filed. You will be in a facility by Christmas, and this will all be over. You raised me to be ambitious, to take what I need. You just never thought I would need to take from you." The recording continued with Daniel laughing, actually laughing, about how easy it had been to manipulate me, how he had practiced forging my signature for weeks, how the corrupt notary owed him a favor. He talked about Lisa and Mike like they were obstacles to be managed with small payoffs. He even joked about which nursing home had the worst reviews, saying it did not matter because I would probably be too medicated to know the difference. The room erupted. Mike lunged toward Daniel, and I had to grab his arm to stop him. Lisa was sobbing, screaming at her brother, calling him a monster. Jennifer was pale and silent, realizing for the first time that everything was about to collapse. I turned off the recording and looked at Daniel with something that might have been pity if there was any love left in my heart for him. "You confessed to everything, Daniel. You admitted to fraud, to forgery, to planning to imprison me. You gave me all the evidence I needed." That was when Catherine walked down the stairs with the court reporter. That was when Detective Chen and her partner came through the front door, badges displayed. Daniel's eyes went wide with genuine terror. "Daniel Hayes and Jennifer Hayes," Detective Chen said formally, "you are under arrest for elder fraud, identity theft, forgery, and conspiracy to commit financial exploitation. You have the right to remain silent." Daniel looked at me, really looked at me, and finally understood. His mother was not the helpless victim he had imagined. She never had been. The next 3 months moved with a speed and efficiency that shocked even Catherine. The evidence against Daniel and Jennifer was so overwhelming, so meticulously documented, that Daniel's expensive lawyers advised him to take a plea deal rather than go to trial. They knew that recording of his confession alone would destroy him in front of any jury. No amount of legal maneuvering could explain away his own words. his own voice laughing about locking his mother in a nursing home while he stole everything she had. Daniel pleaded guilty to all charges: elder fraud, identity theft, forgery, conspiracy to commit financial exploitation, and embezzlement from his own company. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s who had clearly seen too many cases like this, showed no mercy. She sentenced Daniel to 5 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole before serving at least 3 years. She told him from the bench that betraying one's own mother for money was among the most despicable crimes she had encountered in 30 years of practice. Daniel's real estate license was permanently revoked. His business, already drowning in debt from his gambling and embezzlement, collapsed within weeks. Everything he had built, every success he had been so proud of, vanished like smoke. Jennifer filed for divorce before Daniel even finished processing into prison. She hired a ruthless attorney and portrayed herself as another victim of Daniel's manipulation, claiming she had not understood the full extent of his crimes. The prosecutor did not buy it, and neither did the judge. The emails proved Jennifer had been an active, willing participant in every aspect of the conspiracy. She received 3 years in prison and a permanent criminal record that would follow her for the rest of her life. The house they had purchased with my stolen money was seized by the court and sold at auction. My finances were completely restored through the criminal restitution process. Every penny Daniel had stolen was returned to me, plus additional damages and legal fees. The fraudulent home equity line was voided. The forged second mortgage was canceled, and the corrupt notary who had helped Daniel was arrested and lost her license. My house was mine again, free and clear, exactly as Robert and I had left it. I made the difficult decision to change my will, working with Catherine to create an ironclad legal document that explicitly excluded Daniel and clearly stated why. I divided my estate equally between Lisa, Mike, and a trust fund for my grandchildren that they could not access until they turned 25. I wanted them to grow up before they had access to significant money, to learn the value of work and sacrifice the way I had. Catherine helped me establish protections that would prevent anyone from ever having unauthorized access to my accounts again. But something else happened during those months that I had not expected. As word spread about my case through the legal community and local news, I started receiving calls and letters from other elderly people who suspected their own family members were stealing from them but did not know what to do. They felt ashamed, confused, guilty about suspecting their own children. They thought they were alone. I realized I was not the only mother who had been betrayed. I was just one of the few who had fought back and won. And I decided that my experience, as painful as it was, could serve a purpose. It could help others. I sold my large house 6 months after Daniel went to prison. It held too many memories, both beautiful and poisonous, and I needed a fresh start. I moved into a cozy 2-bedroom condo near Lisa, in a community designed for active seniors. It has a small balcony where I grow roses in containers, the same variety Robert and I planted together 40 years ago. They bloom every spring, reminding me that beautiful things can survive even the harshest winters if their roots are strong enough. My new life is different, but it is mine. I wake up each morning without fear, without suspicion, without the weight of betrayal crushing my chest. Lisa visits twice a week, and we cook together, laugh together, and sometimes cry together about what Daniel did to our family. Mike calls every Sunday evening, the time slot Daniel's calls used to occupy, and we talk about everything and nothing. My grandchildren, Daniel's children, still see me regularly. Their mother eventually allowed supervised visits after months of family therapy. I refused to poison them against their father, but I also refused to pretend that what he did was acceptable. They deserve to know the truth, age appropriately, so they can grow up understanding that love without accountability is not really love at all. 3 days a week, I volunteer at the County Senior Center, running a program I helped create called Protect Yourself, Protect Your Legacy. I teach elderly people how to recognize the warning signs of financial abuse, how to protect their assets, how to have difficult conversations with family members about money, and most importantly, how to understand that standing up for yourself is not selfish or cruel. It is survival. Catherine sometimes comes as a guest speaker, offering free legal consultations. Detective Chen has referred dozens of cases to our program. We have helped more than 100 seniors protect themselves, and we have helped at least 30 file charges against family members who were stealing from them. This work has given my pain a purpose. Every time I see an elderly woman's face when she realizes she is not alone, when she understands that she has the right to fight back against betrayal, even when it comes from her own children, I feel like something good has emerged from something horrible. My suffering was not meaningless. It became a bridge for others to cross from victimhood to empowerment. I think about Daniel sometimes. I will not lie and say, I do not. He is still my son, even if he is a son I no longer recognize. I hope prison teaches him something about consequences, about empathy, about the difference between loving someone and using them. But I do not wait for his apology anymore. I do not need his redemption to find my peace. I found it on my own, in my garden, in my work, in my relationships with the children who still honor me and the grandchildren who still love me. I learned the hardest lesson a mother can learn, that unconditional love does not mean accepting unacceptable behavior. It means loving someone enough to hold them accountable, even when it breaks your heart. It means understanding that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone face the consequences of their choices. It means knowing that you can forgive someone without ever letting them hurt you again. Family is one of life's greatest blessings, but it is not a free pass for cruelty, theft, or betrayal. Real love is built on respect, honesty, and mutual care. When someone uses your love as a weapon against you, when they exploit your kindness and mistake it for weakness, the most important thing you can do is stand firm in your worth and demand justice. Trust is sacred, but it must be earned and maintained. Blood relation does not entitle anyone to your life savings, your dignity, or your freedom. Age does not equal helplessness. Being kind does not mean being foolish. And standing up for yourself, even against your own children, is not betrayal. It is survival. It is self-respect. It is teaching the next generation that there are lines that should never be crossed, and consequences that must be faced when those lines are violated. The greatest gift you can give your family is not blind forgiveness or unlimited tolerance. It is boundaries, accountability, and the understanding that real love protects both people in the relationship, not just one at the expense of the other. Now I want to hear from you. What would you have done if you were in Margaret's situation? Would you have called the police on your own son, or would you have tried to handle it privately within the family? Do you think she was too harsh, or do you believe Daniel got exactly what he deserved? Have you or someone you know ever experienced financial abuse from a family member? How did you handle it? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might help someone else who is going through something similar right now. If this story moved you, if it made you think, or if it reminded you that it is never too late to stand up for yourself, please hit that like button. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful real-life stories about courage, justice, and survival. And most importantly, if you know an elderly person in your life, someone's mother or father or grandparent, check on them. Make sure they are safe. Make sure they are protected. Make sure no one is taking advantage of their kindness or their trust. Sometimes the greatest act of love is simply paying attention. Remember, strength has no age limit, justice has no expiration date, and it is never, ever too late to stand up for what is right. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next story.